And welcome to this episode of Digitally. Now, we've been incorporating many of your inputs as we go into the design of the program for this year. And we have a great set of conversations planned as we go deeper into the practical applications, the opportunities, the challenges across data, across digital, and artificial intelligence. Today's topic is about building data-driven businesses. And our guest today is Murli Buluswar, who heads analytics at Citibank. Murli, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Sanjay, good morning. I think it's still morning on the West Coast. A delight to be joining you in this conversation.
Thank you for being here. I want to tell our viewers the side story behind this. You know, in planning this conversation, as I often do, I reach out to many of my peers. And one of the names that came up consistently was actually Murli's name in terms of bringing this discussion to life. And so here he is on special request. Many of you will know Murli, but Murli is obviously currently at Citi. Previously, he's been the Chief Science Officer at AIG. He's been a Senior Advisor to BCG. He's been a startup entrepreneur. He's an entrepreneur in residence at Columbia University, something I'm very passionate about. And by the way, he's also joined us at the Executive Technology Board, so I get a chance to work with him very closely. He's a real-life operator and finger in the details. He's a keen thinker and a strategist, and as you'll shortly see, super passionate about the topic of data and analytics. So let's now go back to data-driven businesses and data-driven organizations. We've talked before on this forum, there are really three keys to success. There's kind of the tech foundation and getting that platform in place. There's everything to do with data strategy, the corporation, and making sure you're headed in the right direction. And then, of course, there's culture and the change management that comes around going to culture. Today's discussion, we're not going to talk technology. We'll come back at that at another time. We'll go into some details there. So I want to focus this discussion, Murli, on the two topics that are really close to our heart. One is strategy, and the other one is culture. Let's start with strategy, and we want to unpack that together. So I'm going to turn to you in your current role, in all of your roles across the financial services industry, in the work that you do. What are kind of two or three, maybe, top three checklist items, things that you must do to be able to conquer that element of your approach?
Excellent. Thank you again, Sanjay. The way my brain processes information, I think all of our brains are in rules of three. So I'll actually take three themes to share with you, if I may. Theme number one for me is this notion of create a portfolio of work that balances time, value, and certainty. Theme number two is learn to think and act like a CEO, a CFO, and a head of audit all at the same time. And theme number three is learn when to follow, when to partner, and how and when to lead. Happy to unpack any one of those.
Oh my gosh, those three are fantastic, and I can already sense what's coming behind it. But let's pick the first one. You talked about this portfolio approach. I'm just back from Sand Hill Road in California yesterday. This is a tried and tested approach on the venture side. How do you put it to work in a large enterprise?
So my thesis on that front, Sanjay, is that when we think about a body of work that the decision sciences or analytics or data science team is committed to delivering, you have to think about how you build relevance in the short, medium, and long term. Therefore, you have to be tackling a set of problems that might whet the curiosity appetite of your colleagues in the near term, while ensuring that you're driving step change intelligence in the medium term, and then more fundamental, to use a word that is probably excessively used these days, transformation in the slightly more longer medium term or longer term, so to speak. So having that portfolio approach allows you to be strategic. It allows you to be relevant. It allows you to drive near-term financials and outcomes, while also keeping your eyes on the bigger prize that might take a little bit more time to realize.
And that's true not just for mindshare, Murli, but it's also true for capital allocation, isn't it? And not into the specifics of exactly what you're doing at the firm you're at, but maybe broadening across financial services as an industry. Is there a certain percentage distribution as you think about these three horizons to ensure that you're sort of taking a balanced approach of capital investment, by the way? How would you think about investing capital across those horizons?
I think that it would vary depending on the maturity and the life stage. So if a team is a little bit more nascent, you'd want to skew a little bit more toward the near-term goals a little bit. But as you build that momentum, gain that credibility and trust, I think it's time to start exercising your more strategic thinking and be asking and answering questions that people aren't necessarily directly asking that can drive step change intelligence in decision making and financials at the firm or team that you're part of.
That's great insight, because really what you're saying, it's a dynamic distribution, and it depends, and it kind of varies based on both the maturity of the organization and frankly, the credibility of the leader. And I think you put it so aptly. Let's go to your second point. It sounded like, put yourself in the shoes of the user. And I think you talked about the CEO and the CIO and the business users kind of perspective. Give us a little bit more on that.
Absolutely. So I said CEO, CFO, and head of audit. What does that mean? If you're thinking like a CEO, you're thinking of materiality. How is this sort of bending the curve on the future of that business unit or the larger enterprise in a way that is meaningful and appreciable on scale? CFO is very simply saying at the end of the day, there's got to be some measurement for a big part of it, not all of it necessarily, that manifests itself in either the P&L or the balance sheet. How do you measure that, and how do you know that you've actually been able to drive that end outcome in a way that is making the enterprise or that business unit more sustainably financially, again, through the lens of both your sort of flow of P&L and the stock of your balance sheet? And head of audit is simply at the end of the day to say, if you're making a set of claims of outcomes that you've driven, regardless of whether they're financial or non-financial, you have to have that mindset of saying, do we know that this is having the impact that it is intended to? And how do we measure that in a way that builds confidence, even when the measures are non-financial?
So, Murli, I mean, this is amazing, because what you're saying is three things, right? You're saying not only do you need to put yourself in the shoes of your consumer, your customer in this case, you actually have to think about outcome metrics, and a cool project is not enough of a result. It's business outcomes that we're going after here, and that's forefront in your mind and others in leaders. And then you're talking about designing metrics that actually capture that. And I'm just curious, in the world of metrics, if there's a few things that come to mind that you can share with us that you've used to drive this point home.
Certainly. So the way we think of our goals within my team is category number one, Sanjay, is financials realized. Category number two is financials identified, but not yet realized. Category number three is this notion of adoption and non-financial change that we've driven in decision-making, whether it's in the speed of decision-making in some particular area or what have you, or the more clarity with which decisions are made. Category number four that we have are new frontiers of innovation, sort of new questions that we're asking that are a little bit more early stage, and will hopefully ultimately many of them will manifest themselves in outcomes and financial metrics. And category number five is this notion of the beta of what we do, which is delivering in-year operating commitments that aren't necessarily the alpha initiatives that are initiated by the decision sciences team, but they're a critical part of ensuring that the entire ecosystem and the machinery is operating effectively in service of the sort of achieving your objectives in the next month, the next quarter, and the next year, so to speak.
It's fantastic. The piece about alpha, the piece about the beta, and just actually that framework itself. I feel like I should write that down. But let's move on. I think the third thing you were bringing up was this whole idea of end-to-end, and I read that as it's not a destination, it's a journey, and taking a very sort of methodical approach. Fill that up a little bit. Give us fill up the gaps a little bit. Give us a little better color on what you mean by that.
By the cultural piece of it, right? So
no, the piece about taking an end-to-end approach to how you integrate intelligence, right? You talked a little bit about that.
Yes. So the notion essentially is the risk for many functions, including a data science or an analytics or decision science function, is to measure success through a simple functional lens of delivering a set of insights or intelligence. And my challenge or my opportunity that I see is that those measures are intermediate steps. They're not necessarily the end metrics. Hence my point about a CEO might care about the fact that his or her, their decision sciences or analytics team is coming out with super useful insights. But at the end of the day, the question they're going to ask themselves is, how is this driving financial outcomes? And how is this driving the breadth or the speed or the depth of decision making in some important area of their business? And that requires this capability, this data science or analytics capability, to not just think vertically as a function, but think horizontally and understand that end-to-end process of the change that they're trying to affect.
Wow. So this is the piece that actually gets to culture, right? And what is the right culture for an organization to be data-driven? And more importantly, and I think this is what we're interested in figuring out, is how do you make the transition from one that isn't to one that is? So let's shift gears. Let's talk about culture. We identified that as one of the top 3 drivers of success for data-driven companies. Let us get your take. What does it take to have the right culture? How do you go about it?
Yes. So my team's mission statement this year, Sanjay, is to deliver faster, wider, and deeper data-driven insights to achieve superior decisions and financial outcomes. That last bit of that mission statement is really the delta between a traditional analytics or data science function and a team that is taking more of a decision science approach to how it sees its role within a particular enterprise. For me, there's a few dimensions to that. Dimension number 1 is having an acute sense of what is the end outcome you're looking to drive. And that outcome, again, is not just delivering a piece of analysis or building a model or even a software solution or what have you. It is to bend the curve on the clarity with which decisions are being made, and to bend the curve on the financial health of the business in some measurable way. So thinking about that integration is very powerful. That's theme number 1, but I'll pause there for a moment.
Well, you should, because my God, I'm just letting that soak in. It's such a powerful concept. I mean, the idea of going from a data analytics team that is purposed and chartered with delivering data and analytics to a team that thinks of themselves as a decision scientist, and they're actually focused on business outcomes and results. And that cultural reorientation, it needs to happen across the company, but frankly, it needs to happen in your and other teams like yours. How do you drive that change in orientation? Is it just publishing a mission statement? Are you at it every day? Talk to us a little bit about how, if we were to be on that journey, what would it be like?
It's a lot more than publishing a mission statement. Although, Sanjay, I will say this, up until last year, my team's mission statement was to be a critical partner in achieving a quantum leap in customer intelligence. That is a useful mission statement. However, as I reflected upon it, it's an incomplete mission statement because intelligence unto itself is not very useful unless it actually drives change. So the way we're actually framing our team goals this year, and we're in final stages of sort of codifying those for the rest of the year, is again, asking the more fundamental question of what does success look like? So for example, we built this software solution that we call marginal ROI that helps us toggle decisions that we can make in allocation of scarce marketing dollars that sum up to north of $1 billion. And so we're now able to answer the question, which customer or prospect segment, what product, what offering, which channel, and when, and to what end. We're able to answer that in a dynamic way with the analytics embedded in a software solution that we developed in-house. So the question then is, delivering that software solution, even though that really doesn't exist in the marketplace today, is a massive achievement. However, at the end of the day, we're aspiring to bend the curve on how close we get to the Pareto optimal efficiency frontier of maximizing, say, net present value as one metric in a cost-neutral basis, or achieving the same net present value and reducing our costs that we have for marketing expense. But that's just not going to happen organically. So we're actually imposing upon ourselves or challenging ourselves with a set of measures that take that CEO, CFO, and head of audit lens to say, you know what, as the year progressed, this capability that we've developed has actually made a difference in a material way that not only we're staking a claim on as a data science or decision science team, but a CEO or a CFO or a head of audit could say, yes, indeed, they're willing to put their stamp of approval on the change that it has affected.
So if I got that right, what you're talking about culture is at a level and a framework that's super interesting. You're talking about this evolution from being a data analyst organization to a decision science organization. You're talking about setting up a mission with clarity and purpose that is specific and narrow, so it changes, that allows people to sort of figure out what the North Star is. And you're talking about designing these metrics, kind of incremental net present value on a cost neutral basis. One of the ones you talked about that bring clarity and focus on a day-to-day basis, right? So it feels like a lot of the pieces of the framework, but I'm going to push you a little bit. I'm going to push you on the people dimension, right? Because this means a lot of change in your own organization or organizations like yours that others lead. But frankly, it also means change in the rest of the organization as they now interface and interact with the data, decision science, analytics teams, right? Talk to me, if you will, a little bit about what that interplay looks like and what that evolution looks like.
Certainly. It reminds me of a book called Drive that was probably written about 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember if it's Daniel Pinker or Daniel Pink, so you'll have to forgive me. But the theme there is what drives people in their career aspirations is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And
hold on, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Love it. Okay.
And that book made a big impression upon me because it sort of underscored to me the fact that we all come to work, and yes, there's sort of a financial component to it, but we're all looking to be part of something bigger than us that we can contribute to, that we can learn from, that gives us a sense of fulfillment in the here and now, and that allows us to tell a story for our career in this chapter that parlays itself in growth in this particular context or in a different context. At the end of the day, that's my broader mission, is all of these to manifest themselves in people having a greater sense of confidence and clarity and accomplishment in who they are and what they've accomplished together. And so what I find is that giving people that freedom a little bit and the encouragement and the support and setting a high bar for how we measure success and having the sense of collective is very powerful in getting people to think of their roles a little bit differently than they might have historically.
This is such an amazing conversation, Murli. I mean, you talked about the fundamentals of culture, of strategy, of metrics, of change management, of people orientation. You know, it goes to what I said earlier to my viewers. You know, you're a deep thinker in the space. You bring so many different experiences and kind of converge them into your trade. You know, I want to maybe spend the last few minutes just talking about you a little bit and maybe your journey and what lessons the rest of us and aspects of that can we take away. So maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, you, and more importantly, what does it take for people to succeed in a data-driven world, and what does that mindset look like?
Thank you, Sanjay. And look, the fact of the matter is that success is a little bit of an esoteric measure. And it means different things to different people, and there's absolutely no single path that is well scripted. I'm happy to sort of share my guiding principles. Some of it might be interesting and useful, and certainly it would be incomplete as people think about their own vision for themselves. But there's really three things that I think about. Number one is this notion of growth mindset. Number two is this notion of seeing a problem or a situation through multiple apertures, a little bit like this notion of being able to zoom in and zoom out. And number three is playing this role of a connector and recognizing that at the end of the day, the role of decision sciences is affecting what decisions are made and how decisions are made. And that involves people. And what drives human behavior is, in my view, ethos, pathos, and logos, probably in that sequence. And so understanding that human behavior and understanding the emotional and cultural context of changes that you're hoping to be able to play a role in driving is critical, because at the end of the day, just facts and data and objectivity does not necessarily manifest itself in in the end outcome. How people make decisions and what decisions are made are much more sophisticated and complex and, dare I say, convoluted than that.
My God, I mean, that is so insightful, Murli. In some ways, as I listen to you talk, I mean, yes, of course, this applies to data and analytics and decision sciences and artificial intelligence alike, but actually applies so much broader in life per se, right? This aspect of a growth mindset. I love what you said about the zoom in and zoom out. I think that's where great leaders are distinguished from good leaders, because the ability to go deep in, you know, at a moment's notice and abstract out to be able to kind of think about it more broadly is a phenomenal component. And I loved what you said about becoming the connector, the person, the leader that ties it together. Because, you know, at least I believe, and I know many do, that the next set of advances come at the convergence of disciplines, not just in one discipline. Wow.
Indeed.
You've really given us so much more to think about. If there's a few other things that you want to say, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I know we're respectful of your time. You're probably going to get a few messages on LinkedIn as this gets a little bit of conversation. If you do, we'd love for you to find the time to actually respond to that. But anything else you want to add to the conversation, Murli?
Just some parting thoughts, if I may, Sanjay. This has been an absolute delight. An executive coach once said to me, you know, the most fundamental questions that we might have for ourselves can actually be a voicemail greeting on our phones, which is, who are you and what do you want? And I think having that sense of clarity and really being able to separate motion from progress and working hard on a day in, day out basis to make the complex simple has been something that I try to remind myself every day. Making simple complex, I think pretty much anybody that has ever walked the face of this earth can do, but making complex simple and having that clarity of thinking and communication and action is something that really is sort of top of mind for me on a day in, day out basis.
That's an amazing insight, and what a great piece of coaching. You know, you and I are both parents. We know this because you and I are friends in real life as well. And one of the things I think we're both learning is when you're with your kids, succinctness and brevity is what really matters. If you can't get your message out in a small number of words, it ain't going to get through. So I love what you said, and of course, it's true in business as well.
And I have to say, Sanjay, you are a role model for my 14-year-old. Thank you for that. And this has been an absolute delight.
You're very kind. Thank you for that. But look, we're very grateful for your time, for your leaning in on this topic, and for the continued conversation. Murli, thank you for joining us. You're in New York today, so I know it's a little later in your day than mine. I appreciate you making time for this, and we'll speak soon.
A delight, Sanjay. Thank you. Cheers.